Morning folks, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School out here on a rainy Ohio day. Thought maybe what we do today is we're going to make this trencher. And a trencher was basically a plate. And they were used from, 500 BC. There are drawings and things of trenchers being used to eat food out of. They started out flat and then they became concaved during medieval times. And they were used all the way up through the frontier era and are still collected by lots of folks today. And it's not a plate, it's not a bowl. It's called a trencher. And basically the reason it was called a trencher, the nickname trencher, came from the fact that a lot of the foods that were cooked back then were made like stews and pot victuals, things like that. So they would pour that in there and they would use their bread to trench up and sop it up with the gravy and eat it. So this was called a trencher because you could trench into it with your bread and sop up all that gravy and all that good fixings in that stew. So we're going to make one of these today, and what we're going to do today is we're going to use our fine forest axe, our Wetterling's fine forest axe, and we're going to use a crook knife by Deepwoods Ventures. And it's a pretty good crook knife. I've had a set of these for a couple, 3 years. I've used them quite often. It's a good little tool to put in your kit. And you can burn a bowl like this probably not in the same amount of time it takes to carve one, because it only took me about an hour to carve this, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. But you can burn a bowl as efficiently as you can carve a bowl, I guess the word for it would be. But the difference between carving and burning to me is, A, if I'm burning a bowl, I can't stop and take a break really because I've got coals burning in there. I've got to take them out and kind of start over. So I can't really take a break and walk away from it and come back very easily. The other big concern to me, or the other big advantage to carving over burning, is if I'm burning, I'm creating ashes. If I'm carving, I'm creating tinder. Big difference. I'd much rather have the tinder than sit in front of a fire and burn a bowl if I don't have to. So if I can carry some type of a crook knife of some kind in my kit, especially for long term, then I'm going to do it. So let's get started on our project, guys. Stay with me. And one of the tools that I'm going to use today is called the crook knife, and this is a crook knife that's made by a company called Deepwoods Ventures, and they make several different crook knife style design tools and carving tools that you can use for making wooden implements. I've had these for a few years, and they also make a strop. And a strop is what you use to keep that thing fairly sharp, and it's just a piece of leather, and all you do is run that blade away from, not toward the blade, but away from the blade. They're usually only sharpened on one side. And you just run that across that strop to keep it good and sharp. And then you use that crook knife to cut pieces out of the wood, just like this. And you can see how that carves that out. Now this is a little bit wet. It did rain last night. So something like this is going to take some time. And one thing that I've found doing this stuff is that when you're doing wood, when you're carving wood like this, it really doesn't matter what the piece of wood is. I mean, I always try to use a softer wood. It just makes it easier to carve. But even if you've got a straight grain piece of wood like this pine, it's going to cut one direction easier than it's going to cut the other direction. It just seems to be the way of it. So if you can find the direction that it cuts well in and do the majority of your material reduction from that direction, you'll be doing yourself a favor and saving yourself a lot of headache. Okay, well, that's not too shabby. Pretty good trencher. Now we need to work on the outside of it. We don't need all this big heavy wood to carry around, so we need to shave off everything on the outside now. And we're going to do that with our axe. Folks, that about wraps up our project for the day on making a trencher. A little damp right now, I need to let it dry out some. Then I'll seal it with fix and wax, maybe sand it off a little bit. You could take this down to the creek, get some sand out of the creek and sand this thing up a little bit, smooth it out some, but I kind of like that rough hewn look. A lot of the ones that I've seen that are artifacts have that rough hewn, chipped out look where they've been chiseled out with a tool or an implement. And I kind of like that, so I think I'm going to leave it like that and just seal it up and use it. I thank you guys for joining me for this video. I thank you for everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, my affiliates, my sponsors, and my friends. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.